99X, the Morning X, it's Barnes and Leslie. And you know, Fram, there's one big reason, there's a few, but one big one why you're hearing our voices right now.
The magic of radio?
The magic of radio mixed with the magic of nostalgia.
Absolutely. That's why we did that podcast before we came back on the air.
100%. And when people ask about the success of 99X, when they ask me out in the wild, I just stare at them and go, what are you talking about? But then when they say, like, how did all this happen? And I said, you know what? It's got to be a weird mix of nostalgia, recognizability, the emotions that you're feeling when you hear these songs or these bands, even with their new songs. All of that together has made some really weird, combustible, emotional explosion in your head.
We spent most of our lives at 99X, if you remember. And when I think about all the stuff we did and like the big day outs and stuff, it just sort of just brings me joy of being some of the best times of my life.
And I'm not kidding. Like all those things that I just said, that is real stuff. And I thought it would be really interesting to talk to someone who actually had letters after their name, unlike me. It just stops at Barnes. There's no PhD.
You're not in psychology today.
Well, funny you should mention that because our next guest is. And I thought it would really be cool for all of us to understand why in this time in pop culture are we seeing so many reboots, remakes, comebacks.
All the time. All the time.
It's scientific. It really is. So please welcome Hal McDonald. He's a PhD, a writer in Psychology Today. Good morning, Hal. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing really good. We are fascinated by what you know a lot about, and we would love for you to break it down to like an 8-year-old level for us to understand.
Exactly.
Like, I know you're a professor of literature and linguistics at Mars Hill University. You're an author, and you write for Psychology Today. What is this crazy nostalgia?
Well, it's a feeling we all experience quite frequently. But to break it down in neuroscience terms, as we go about our daily lives, the parts of our brain responsible for emotion are always monitoring our environment for potential survival threats or rewards. And when it finds something that it likes, it floods our brain with pleasurable neurochemicals. And when it finds something that it doesn't like a threat, it activates a fear response. And it remembers those responses later on. So when you remember an occasion that you were afraid, the fear response is going to be triggered again. But when you remember an occasion where you had pleasure and enjoyed yourself, that same feeling is going to be triggered later on, just the same.
Your article's great, Understanding the Nostalgic Brain. Why did you decide to delve into this? There had to have been a reason.
Yeah, actually, there was. When my youngest child went off to college several years ago, we found ourselves to be empty nesters. I was suddenly just flooded with nostalgic feelings, and I became fascinated with what was going on in your brain to make you feel that way. And so I started doing some informal research and got really fascinated with it. And informal turned into formal, so I spent several years looking into it.
Well, how would you explain the return of our radio station? So all these years and all the people that listen here in Atlanta from the early 90s through early 2000s, because I say that because it stopped being good around that time. And then those people are all back and we're all back. The same people are back in their positions pretty much across the dial. Rest in peace, Sean Demery. But what is it about that can create this feeling for people?
Well, we love to just feel nostalgia. It's a pleasurable feeling, especially in times of stress. And we're definitely living in stressful times. But the pleasure, particularly involved with music, music is a very intrinsic pleasure. It activates many reward centers of our brain. Just when we hear a song we like, we're drawn to it again and again and again, very much like we are a drug. But music, unlike drugs, connects with our autobiographical life. Our experiences that we're going through when we hear a song become intertwined with the song, so that the music later on when we hear it brings us pleasure, but it also is connected inextricably with the memories of the times that we were living in. And so we relive those through the pleasures of the music. And nostalgia has been shown in many studies to be a way of elevating mood and alleviating loneliness and some of the things that are sort of epidemic in our culture right now.
We're talking to Dr. Hal McDonald, PhD. I thought about that when I read your article because so many people go to their high school reunions because they remember all the good times when they were in high school. And you sort of break it down. You talk about, the different ways that play into nostalgia: self-reflection, autobiographical memory, emotion regulation, and reward. Mm-hmm. Barnes, this is why you and I can probably sing the lyrics to like every single 90s song, but if you gave me a song today, I don't think I could recite all the lyrics.
Because you're not connecting to it.
You're exactly, and this is what you're saying, Hal, in this whole article. It really is about going back to those times that you remember the most that brought you pleasure.
Right, and the times that we're most connected with are the period in our early adolescence and early adulthood, which has been called the reminiscence bump because we have a disproportionate number of memories from that period. And that's one reason that the music we heard in high school has a permanent place in our memories. And we have, even though we like the music today, we don't identify with it in the way we did back then because our brains tend to latch on to things that are important and remember things that are important. And when you're a teenager, everything is important. So you tend to remember all of the things. And any song you hear in that period is going to be heightened in its importance to you. And another thing that the brain responds to and latches onto is novelty. Novelty is an intrinsic reward for the brain, and you tend to remember the new things in your life. And during that period of your life, everything is new. And so you have a sort of a double dose of incentive to remember those things later on.
That is so interesting. And you talk about how it also could be a positive or a negative. And when I was, 17 or 18, I remember having an accident. And I remember in the car, it wasn't a very bad one, but it dented the whole side of my car. And I remember exactly what song was on the radio. It was Talking Heads' Burning Down the House. And to this day, the minute I hear that song start, you might notice I don't play it a ton on here because I always think about it, or I turn it off, or I turn it down in the studio. But it takes me right back to that moment of getting hit. Why is that? Your brain takes a snapshot of...
Yeah, you're the emotional centers of our brain, unfortunately, remember things much better than the conscious parts of our brain because the emotional centers are largely unconscious. We're aware of them in the impact they have on our bodies, but we have very little control over them. So when your body experienced that accident, your brain said, everything about this situation is dangerous and avoid it at all costs. And, your conscious mind can discriminate. There's nothing about that song that's dangerous, but your implicit memory of that event is going to tell you, no, stay away from anything that has to do with that experience, including the song. So, unfortunately, you can't talk yourself out of something like that.
Yeah.
You talked earlier about, the times we're living in. I believe this is what happened during COVID because it was a very stressful time for a lot of people being in lockdown, and a lot of people turned to nostalgia, rewatching like The Office and Friends. Do you find that really happened a lot after or during and after the pandemic?
Yeah, I think that we've marked the past by boundaries of new things in our lives, and the beginning of COVID was sort of the ultimate boundary. And so the past sort of was anything before COVID. And so I found myself being nostalgic for things that happened the week before. When we were in the first week of lockdown, it seemed like the distant past. And but nostalgia is a way of coping it, for ways that it's a good escape for one thing, but it does also just make you feel better, and it can alleviate loneliness because many of our nostalgic memories are social. They have people in them.
It's soothing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it is.
That's it. With the people that come up to me, at least, I can't speak for everyone else here, but people that come up and talk about how 99X makes them feel. both the brand and the music because it takes them to a time in their life where they were young and free and doing whatever. But then there's this whole new group of people who just discovered it, and they're starting to attach themselves to it, hearing the love from other people talking about how it makes them feel.
I think that whole 90s alternative is just it's having this unbelievable resurgence.
It's really wild. Well, thank you for sharing that. This is fascinating. You should seek out this article. Hal McDonald, just Google Hal McDonald Psychology Today. What's the name of the article again, Leslie? It's
Understanding the Nostalgic Brain.
Yeah, so interesting. Well, thank you for taking a few seconds to hang with us, Hal. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Have a great day. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.